I saw on your LinkedIn page, you matter. You believe a lot in that and you put that out.
I had a stroke when I was born. And so that defined my growing up experience of education, of being in the world. And art was very important to me.
But I'm not an artist. I can't draw, I can't paint, I don't understand music.
I would say about 90 to 95% of my clients walk in the door saying exactly that. I'm not an artist, I can't draw. And
almost 90%.
Don't make me move. I'm not going to do that for you. You know, like they have very big defenses. Like, psychodrama isn't about great theater. It's about expressing that deeper self through action. And I said, tell me more about what you want to see. She said, 3 weeks ago, you asked me if this was a volcano. And all I can tell you is for the last 3 weeks, I've been irrationally angry at everybody in my life.
Today on Let's Talk, I'm honored to welcome Jennie Kristel, a registered expressive art therapist. With decades of work with helping people deal with trauma, anxiety, and grief, Jennie has traveled across the world. What makes Jennie unique is how she integrates and creates a holistic approach in her therapy. She's trained in psychodrama, expressive arts, playback theater. She's a master-level teacher in Reiki, Qigong, and energy work. She has led 2 playback theater companies where improvisation is done through real-life stories and healing happens. Let's talk with Jennie Kristel about expressive arts and much more. Hi, Jennie. Welcome to Let's Talk.
Hi, thank you very much. It's an honor.
It's our pleasure. It's our honor to have you here as a guest today. I've been waiting to have this conversation with you since quite some time. So thank you for doing this despite our time difference and everything. I know you've had a busy week, but thank you once again for being here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Jennie, your work beautifully blends theater, expressive arts, Reiki, healing, psychodrama. I'm a little curious. How did this journey start?
That is a great question, Rashmi. And I could answer it in multiple different ways. As a child, I actually had learning difficulties. I actually had disabilities growing up and was neurodivergent, I had a stroke when I was born. And so that defined my growing up experience of education, of being in the world. And art was very important to me. My mother at the time took me to dance classes and horseback riding and whatever she could do to get me to move and find balance. And this was long before, the ways in which we work with people now, in terms of expressive therapies or anything. And I was in high school and struggling because I did. My brain struggled with writing and reading. And I went to a high school that had an art studio, and I would go in that studio, not only for class, but after class, I would go and make a mess, basically, and have fun and just encourage it. And my teacher, who was actually also my advisor, looked at it and said, have you ever heard of art therapy? And again, this is before internet. We had these big volumes to understand colleges and university, which we paged through. And I had never heard of art therapy. I was very interested in drama and, wanted to go to school for theater or something like that. Anyways, it was a curiosity that I decided to look up and found out that you could do a master's program in art therapy or expressive arts therapy and learned about this school in Cambridge called Lesley College. But at that time, which was the mid-70s and into the 80s, you couldn't do a bachelor's in art therapy. You couldn't do a bachelor's in expressive therapies. And in fact, there was concern about me even going to school, you know.
Oh.
So what I did is I got my degree I thought I was getting my degree in theater and learned very quickly that wasn't the kind of theater I wanted to do because I went to a school that did Broadway shows and everything. It was very, very oriented to auditions and scripted theater and everything else. And got my degree in psychology and with a minor in theater, and then ended up at Lesley College, which is where I got my degree in expressive therapy. So that's a very long-winded way to say that basically it was when I was in high school that I found this calling because I wanted to do something with the healing arts, although it wasn't called that at the time, therapy. One point thought I wanted to be a doctor, something where there was that level of understanding, and also wanted to incorporate the arts. So it was really just try to wend its way through. And I'm grateful to that advisor, that teacher in high school who suggested it to me, and it really helped define my life trajectory because it's been a path in my life ever since. Yeah.
You mentioned Lesley College. Isn't that where now you are a faculty?
It is. It is.
Wow.
I went to Lesley College. It's now Lesley University. We are the first program to integrate all of the arts. So we have an intermodal expressive arts therapy department. It's gone through some changes in the last few years. So students now get a degree in mental health counseling with a specialization in expressive arts therapy. My degree is actually in expressive arts therapy, but my degree looked very different from the degree that students currently get. But at Lesley University, you can also, that's the department I'm in, the specialization I'm in is intermodal, where we weave all the arts together: drama, poetry, art making, dance, music. But students can also go to Lesley University and get a mental health counseling degree with a specialization in music therapy, art therapy, drama therapy, dance movement therapy. And so you can do the single specializations or you can do the intermodal specialization. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I've been teaching at Lesley since 2016.
That's amazing. The college where you started, and then today you're teaching there. And what
Full
you just
circle.
shared, full circle. Yes, it's a full circle. And it also tells that, not every child is the same. If you have some reading and writing disability or any issues with it, the world doesn't stop for you. There are other options.
It's a beautiful experience because I really do credit my years at Lesley when I was a student of really opening that door where I really I felt my brain shifting from because the way in which we work at Lesley is self as instrument, which is if we're going to be asking clients to do art making as a directive, and we are going to ask them to do certain things, we have to do it ourselves. We have to know what it feels like to do those directives. So our courses, which honestly is how I always teach, and in the way in which I teach it in India as well, is put yourself, role reverse, input yourself in the role of the client. What does it feel like for you to be doing these directives? And how do we understand the impact of those directives from the actual doing themselves? So It's very much a way in which we work. It's a theory of practice itself as instrument, which I've also learned in how I've taught, and really the modeling also came from my education of psychodrama. So when I went to Lesley, I was in the psychodrama core group and studying with Peter Rowan, who was the faculty there. And from there, I ended up working with Jonathan Fox, who co-founded Playback Theater with his wife, Jo Salas. And that is how I came to Playback Theater. And all of it is self as instrument. All of it is like, if you're going to learn how to do psychodrama, you have to do psychodrama. If you're going to learn how to do playback theater, you have to tell your own story. You have to practice the art of being a teller, being a protagonist. So, and you can't learn this just from your head and reading a book. You have to experience it. Yeah.
That's the whole core of expressive arts or expressive healing modalities. And like you beautifully shared that, you have to be in that role. You have to experience, and only then, you'll be able to understand what the other person is going through. So that is amazing. You also mentioned the different art forms that are there. Like, you can specialize in music, you can take up arts. So for someone who's never heard about expressive arts therapy, Jennie, how would you describe it to them?
And that's a very good question. I've been working on this for a while because I get asked that question all the time. It's really being able to use the arts, the different arts, as a vehicle to understanding the self, as a way to understand our emotional challenges, to be able to work through our emotional challenges by externalizing and crystallizing through using the arts. So what I mean by that is being able to use art to show what's happening inside our home, what's happening inside our feelings. And when we put it out, either through visual art or music or dance, we're making it concrete. And then what we can do is be able to work with it. So the simpler version to those who have no idea what I'm doing is using the arts as a vehicle to understanding the self or our emotional challenges. Yeah.
So that brings another question to my mind that, a lot of times it could be like, but I'm not an artist. I can't draw, I can't paint, I don't understand music, or maybe, I'm not a good singer, or I don't understand the notes.
Right.
So then how do I get into this therapy, or how can I work with you in an expressive arts therapy?
So I would say about 90 to 95% of my clients walk in the door saying exactly that. I'm not an artist, I can't draw. And
almost 90%.
Don't make me move. I'm not going to do that for you. Like they have very big defenses. And my take on that is somebody taught them. Somebody taught them that they weren't good enough. That's what we want to work on. We want to work on the experience of them feeling that they aren't worthy, that they don't matter, that their art doesn't matter, that they'll never make it, right? And as a kid with disabilities, I heard that message around me on a regular basis. And my take on it is stick figures work. Abstract is fine. And it's about expressing. It's not about how you draw or what you draw. It's about how you express in that moment while you're in that creative act. That actually really helps people understand much more deeply. And as you know, like psychodrama isn't about great theater. It's about expressing that deeper self through action. And the drama is really about supporting people and being able to see it and help each other and concretize it. So I often have to work very, very slowly at the very beginning for people who come in with those defenses and support them. And I have tools where I join with them. Often I'm like, let's just make a mess on a piece of paper. And I love making messes. So let's just put some color to page, line and form, and see what comes out. So I'll play chasing games with drawing scribbles and doodles, and I'm all about doodling, and what we want to do is spark that creative, spontaneous part of the Autonomous Healing Center, because once that spontaneous part begins to emerge, creativity can come from that. And I don't believe in bad art. So I believe in meaningful art. So often what will happen is people will say, oh God, I created such a mess. I said, okay, let's look at this mess. Let's look at it from this angle. Let's look at it from this angle. Let's look at it from that angle. And then let's look at it upside down. What do we see? What images do we see within those? Where are we going? What is the color? What does the color mean to you? It's not about how well the color got put on the page. It's what does it mean to you? Well, this is my darker self. This is my happy self, whatever it is. I mean, I put pink on the page because I really love pink and it makes me glow. I put black on the page because that's what's... All of a sudden, the expression is making meaning, right? And that's the point, is meaning making. And it's somewhere where we can look at it and talk to it. And one of the theories in this practice is that the art itself is a therapist, that the art becomes the vehicle in which both of us, not just the client, but me too as a therapist, to be able to say, what is the art telling us? What is the art saying to us? How do we engage with this? And whether it's music or dance or psychodrama or drama therapy, which goes into scripted theater, it's all about the same thing. Like, where can we go to help make meaning? And that's really what it's about. So sometimes I use objects. Sometimes I'll do collage. Sometimes I'll play games, passing balls back and forth, imaginary balls, like, here we go. And just to spark that creative, spontaneous part.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So what I hear is, Jenny, we're so used to having the meaning first before we do something.
Yeah.
So like you mentioned, somebody picking a pink color or a black color. So if I have to imagine myself and there are colors, I may not even think, and I may just pick something and use it. And then you said that later when you look at that piece and you start making meaning out of it with your therapist, that's where you start, like decoding what you've actually done. And so...
Yeah. And that's one way of working. The other way of working is simply letting the art speak for itself and not interpreting, not talking about it. So the art itself is a therapy. And
just the process of doing it.
Just the process of moving, the process of painting or drawing. I would say in psychodrama, there's a fair amount of meaning making, so that it would be sort of the art in therapy concept. Although psychodrama, to be clear, is not always a therapy, right? It's used in a lot of different places. But with the other arts, music, dance, and art making, it could be the art, like how do I take the paintbrush and apply it? Do I apply it like this? Do I apply it like that? How am I expressing myself through that art? How are the materials being used? What is happening in my body? And then whether we talk about it or not, it's not necessary to, maybe it's enough to simply have just done it. Yeah.
So movement is the word that I hear you say. And how difficult it is to, because there is a lot of resistance, and there is also when there is trauma, we've learned that a lot of it is stored in our body. So
It is
how do you
stored in.
work with movement, or if you can share some client example that
Sure. Movement is hard for people to engage in, and it's very scary to move their bodies, and it's a defense mechanism. I mean, to actually move, to perhaps even put their arms out, somebody who may have been traumatized may be exposing themselves in too much of a way, right? So they want to, and I believe, when people are feeling quote unquote resistant, and it's not, resistance is a symptom, the feelings are underneath, which is fear, anxiety, those old tapes that are resonating, like you're not good enough, you don't matter, that, I work very slowly. And sometimes it's just, can we have a gesture? What would a gesture be? What's a still, right? But one of the other things in the way in which I work is there's seeds, and this comes from one of the founders of expressive therapies, Paulo Cannell. There is a seed in every art of the other arts. So when we're doing psychodrama, for instance, and we are doing movement, inherently through the taking on roles and taking on voices and projecting and we are moving.
Yes.
And we are making art, but we're making art with our body. And you are correct. To do this work, we have to work on the somatic level, because to work on our deeper selves, to work through trauma, to work through challenges, we actually have to change the cellular level of our body. People who have been traumatized, their brains look different. I mean, from a neurological perspective, that is well known, is that someone who has had deep trauma, childhood trauma, their brains look smaller and not as flexible as brains of people who have not experienced similar kinds of trauma. So the goal is, the movement is, even if you're in art therapy and you're doing painting or anything like that, you are moving your body to do the paintbrush, whether you're doing it with your hands or your feet. Because I work with people with profound disabilities. It's like sometimes I attach the paintbrush to their feet, or they're painting with their mouth because they can't use their hands. Whatever they're doing, there's movement. There's movement in our breath. And that's actually the first movement. I actually have to teach people how to breathe. Because a lot of people who come into my office, especially those first few days, first few weeks, are not breathing. And they're usually people who come to see me are not happy. Usually when you enter therapy, you're entering therapy either before because were told you had to. So there's all those levels of layers. Or something's up and you need help. And so usually you're not very happy when you enter therapy. It's very rare that I have a person walk in and going, I'm doing fine. I just wanted to talk to you, And so the first thing I have to do is teach people how to breathe, because often when they feel anguish or whatever, we go, right? And so, and what I want them to do is breathe like that while they're talking about their trauma. So it takes time to learn how to breathe, so then you can actually distance yourself from the trauma to be able to go, okay, this is what's going on.
That's an interesting way to look at it. Breathing is movement, and how that's something that we feel it's an integral thing, and we do it involuntarily, but we don't focus. So just observing a client's breath, the breathing pattern when they come in, can tell us so much about what's going on there.
Yeah, yeah. And it's very profound to see people shift from the person they are when they walk in the door like to, well, that was a moment. and being able to sort of have that level of distancing to be able to go, okay, I'm going to survive this. And that's part of the work, is helping them go from, this is everything, my whole world is this way, and it's traumatizing, to, that's actually a part of my world, but there's other parts of me and they matter just as much. And I actually need to pay attention to those parts too. Yeah.
I saw on your LinkedIn page, you matter. You believe a lot in that and you put that out. So
I do.
Can you share a little about how did that thought come to you?
That actually came through when I was doing family work, and I was doing, my husband and I actually for many years shared an office. He's now retired. But he and I did couples therapy and family therapy together as a unit. So when the families came in or the couples came in, he and I were in the room with them. And that was a very deliberate choice. That was a choice to support families that had mixed genders, for instance, mixed ages, to, in couples work, it meant that each person within the pair had potential of an ally, and we were working with this family, wonderful family, actually, of a mom and 5 adult children. They were all adult. And one of the members of the family was really struggling and had been in and out of patient care units. And through the work, I suddenly realized they don't realize they matter. They don't get it. They don't get that they actually matter to each other, and that all the stories that were swirling around. And so I actually just sort of said, do you guys know you matter? You matter to me, you matter. It's clear to me that you matter to each other, but I'm not sure you know that you matter to each other. And that was kind of a profound insight for me as a therapist. This was like, I don't know, 8 years ago now, 9 years ago, where I realized, wow, that's actually really deep. And they took it, and it became a bit of a phrasing throughout the rest of their therapy, which went on for 2 or 3 years, of, remember, you matter. And if you matter, what is it that we should be saying about our own selves, and how might we want to project ourselves with others? And what does that say about judgment and non-judgment, and supporting each other and having a different perspective of each other, from a more curious, caring, kind perspective. And without kindness, it's really hard to get to caring. And without caring, it's really hard to get to the idea of healing.
Yes.
Yeah. So I created a painting of You Matter, put it up in my office. It became kind of a thing for a lot of my other clients. I was actually just talking about it this week with my students in my class. I was teaching a theories class and said, remember, you guys matter. And you're entering their first year. So this was their first classes with me. And I was like, don't forget, the next 3 years, you're going to have moments, but don't ever forget you matter. And, so I use it now as a mantra, but a phrasing for a way of thinking about things,
But that's so beautiful. And I'm going to take that as a gift from the session today, because it's simple, 2 words, you matter, but they are so profound. And, just hearing that kind of, okay, you matter. It just strikes a chord somewhere, and acknowledging your own self. We always want that from our family, friends, people around us, but are we giving it to ourselves first? Self-care feels like being selfish, but I am going to really stick with this. You matter. And I saw that painting on your LinkedIn. It's beautiful.
Yeah, we ended up stopping therapy with them because my husband, Michael, and I moved out of state to where we are now. So we actually had to close our office. And I gifted the painting to them.
Oh.
So, because it felt like a right place to be is with that family. So they have the painting. And I said, you're going to have to figure out how to split it up between you because there were like 5 houses. I said, but however you want to do it, it's up to you. So,
That's
yeah.
so sweet. And you mentioned that family, they worked with you for 2-3 years. So
Yeah.
many a times, Jenny, when a client walks in for the first time, so we are so used to in terms of medicine or when we go to a doctor that, okay, I may need this much treatment or this is the time that I will need for my, to get better. But when it's about healing yourself and mental healing, emotional healing, uh, there's this question that always comes up: how many sessions will I need?
Medical model, they would say, well, you should be able to work on this issue in 8 sessions and, that will be it. And, we often have to say, well, actually, they probably need more. It depends on the issue that people are coming in with, but the average, there isn't an average. I mean, some people feel well enough after about a year or so. It takes time to build the trust, right? I mean, they've got to trust me. I'm a person, a therapist is a person where people come in and say things they may never have said to anybody else in their life. We hold a lot of secrets, because of the role of confidentiality and the role of, of the way confidentiality works in the process. We hold tremendous number of stories and secrets that, unless there is harm to self, harm to others, we don't share with anybody else ever. And that's designed into the process of therapy. This is a place where you can come share those secrets and be yourself and find yourself. And I will hold that container for you. And and that's an individual work. And group work, of course, whatever is told is shared amongst the number of people in the group, right? But there's no timeline per se. It really depends on what they're bringing in. And I have to say, if they're bringing in significant trauma and you know that from the beginning, you're gonna have a longer time unpacking that. Trauma should not take short amounts of time. It should not be done in a short time. It's not fair to the process. So you have to build the trust to help them take a risk, to have them build a body of work to understand. And you don't do trauma work every single time you see a person. That would be too much on their system, too much on their hearts. They have to recover, a little bit from unpacking a piece of work. And then they have to practice a new way of being in the world where they can say, okay, if I were to be myself and in the world in a different way, what would that look like? And so then they have to practice finding new community if their community is harming them, right? So how do I find new friends? How do I find healthy friends? How do I become healthy, in order to be able to do that? How do I explore being with this person who had been abusive to me and in a different way that allows me to be authentically myself and to speak for myself and to be present, and to be able to say no, right? And how do I learn to say yes to that kind of a person in myself? How do I say yes to my changing? All that takes time, and it's a cellular thing. It's an energetic thing. This is where the energy comes in. All this work is energy, right? And that gets discussed in the psychodrama trainings quite a bit. Is we enter in psychodrama, we call surplus reality, right? We enter surplus reality in order to work on deep and important things. That's the place in which we can make those shifts. We call it in the expressive therapies, we call it decentering, where we're going into the flow. All of that is basically in the same category, the same genre, where we are entering a space in which the imagination, the liminal, the past, present, and future of ourselves and our families and our ancestors all can come in at the same time, or however we need to engage it. And that's where we're doing some of that cellular shifting. So we have to recover from that. We have to say, okay, so we come back out and we practice, and we have to integrate. Maybe recover is not the right word. It's integrate. We have to integrate that experience, right? And it takes time to do that integration. And sometimes we have to go back in a few times on the same subject. And so I've had clients say, I'm still working on this issue. Why am I still working on this issue? I said, because you are not the same person you were the last time you worked on it. You're a different person. And you're coming at it from a different perspective. And so each time builds on the last time.
So I like to call it like, it's a new version of you every time you walk out of a therapy room. So I started with, 2.0, 3.0, you have, and like you very rightly said, that accepting and being that new self, taking on that, okay, this change is there, and, now getting that into your routine and practicing that it takes time. So
it does take time. And it takes time to find your resources. And that's where I always begin. The breathing is a resource. But then I also, before we do any kind of deep work, I want to know, do you have resources? Do you have people in your world that you can get support with? If not, that's where we want to begin. We want to begin with helping them find inner resources, parts of self that they can go to that can say, I have this, I have your back, right? To support the parts of you that feel very sad. But we also want to help them find real support, whether it's through their pets or family or friends or loved ones. Yeah, so the resourcing is a key piece here too.
Yeah. So for someone who does not understand what psychodrama is, can you explain what it is in simple words?
I will try. So psychodrama is where a person who is, if it can be done individually, one-on-one. So the therapist becomes a director, person becomes a protagonist. In group, the therapist becomes the director or is a director. A person is chosen from the group by the group to share a story to work on, and they're called the protagonist. And it's a way for them to use role-playing and spontaneous dramatic action to explore their world, their inner world, their family world, their work world, the external world, and to be able to directly engage with it. And if it's done with a group, the group members become what we call auxiliary egos to support that person in their story, to be able to connect more deeply with their story. And at the end of a psychodrama, there's always a sharing. And so often there's confusion. If only one person gets to share a story, what about the other people in the room? What happens to them? And that's actually in the sharing. If they've been chosen as roles, they may learn a lot about themselves by being chosen to be in a different role, right? But in the sharing, the whole group gets to connect with that one person's story. So if you were to have been the protagonist and shared a story, and I'm a group member, I get to say to you, your story touched me in this way because in my story, blah, 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 right? I get to connect your story with my story in some meaningful way. Or if I played a role in your drama, I get to say from this role, I learned something about myself, about where I go. So it's very spontaneous. It's non-scripted.
Amazing. I know it's difficult to explain and put psychodrama into words because it's so experiential, but thank you for doing that, Jenny. And coming to, can you also explain playback theater?
Sure. Thank you for that. In Playback Theater, which was actually developed by Jonathan Fox and Joe Salas, and Jonathan was a psychodramatist, still is, actually, and understood the power of the work he was thinking about and creating. But he wanted an art form. They wanted to have it be an artistic form and not necessarily therapy. But because he understood the power of the work, he chose people who were psychodrama students alongside him. He was still a student at this time to work on what it was. And playback is an art form. It is done in theaters. It's often done in open ways where tellers are taken, chosen from the audience to tell a story, and then it's spontaneously and creatively played back for them by actors, on a stage, maybe not on stage, but played back for them. So psychodrama, the person protagonist is in the story and, moving through role reversal. And in playback, the teller is witnessing and watching their story unfold. So it's more of a mirroring process. And in playback, the difference is that where in psychodrama we may work on one person's story for half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever. In a playback form, we might choose 6, 7, 8 stories because the stories are shorter. The story is more spontaneous. It's the telling of the story, which might take a little time, and then the playing back, which takes very little time. And then we move to a different story of someone else in the group. And it's that is one of the key pieces, is that that's often how we do the sharing, is through the stories. So you might tell a story, and that might spark a story for me to share, and I might share a story, and then that person will be sparked by what I shared and go, oh, and here's a story that was stimulated by both Rashmi and Jenny, and this is the story I'm going to. And so we're actually sharing through the themes and through the process of engagement. And so, for instance, in an hour and a half performance, we might hear from 15 different people in the audience, 12 to 15 people in the audience, through various kinds of forms. There's thousands of forms to work with, short form and long form.
So it's like me watching my own life as a movie played in front of me.
Yeah, it can be. It can be. And it's one moment, right? You're seeing one moment come alive for you. And the other piece about this is that for both psychodrama and playback, and any group work, actually, using any of the arts, but I think about playback and psychodrama, you're teaching people who are in the groups to witness, to learn how to listen to a story and bear witness and be a witness. You're doing skill building, because to do psychodrama or to do playback theater, the group has to know how to do it well enough to be able to attend. So when I run groups, group therapy, I'm teaching people, this is what role reversal is. This is what playback is. This is what a fluid sculpture is. And this is how we're going to learn. And so they learn how to be actors, or they learn how to be auxiliary egos. And they learn through that learning, they're learning about themselves in a different perspective. They're learning how to offer an act of service, as Jonathan would have said, and how to connect with another person's story outside their own, which might be very challenging for them to think of somebody else first, and to build confidence and self-esteem and connection. And you are, in fact, helping them broaden their creative and spontaneous self and teaching them, oh, I can do things like this. How can I take this into my own world when I go home? right? How can this translate to when I'm at home? Yeah.
Yeah, and as humans, we tend to connect through stories. I read it somewhere. Tell me a fact and I may forget, but tell me a story and I'll always remember that. So probably using stories would be so therapeutic and so powerful. That's just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's very, very powerful. Extremely.
So when someone starts on this journey of psychodrama, there's also this resistance or the logical mind trying to tell you that, but it's a drama, but it's you, or, will this work? How would you address that?
I don't know. I think that that again would be a part of them, a role in them that's coming up saying, yeah, this isn't going to work, or this, it's that ego self that's saying, I don't matter, right? So it may be that might be the next drama to say, okay, let's look at this. What is it that is that's underneath the resistance to accepting the work, right? And that might be the way. So I might just bring it back into a different drama, right? And that that is the way I work, whether I'm doing psychodrama, whether I'm doing playback theater, is what is the next story that needs to come out? What is the next way in which we need to look at it? And actually, I do a lot of playback theater, which is in psychodrama, we have the protagonist that is inside the drama, and it's revolved around the protagonist in the role reversing. In playback theater, it's more of a mirroring, where the person, it's not the protagonist, it's called the teller, tells a story, and then a group of actors play it back for them. So they witness their story being spontaneously and creatively shared. And that's actually the work I have focused on quite a bit. I do psychodrama as integrated in my expressive arts therapy work, but it's actually playback that I have leaned into when I do group work, and because there's something about not only being able to share your story, but to have a group perform it back to you on that level where I can see my story transformed and see it from a different lens. So it's mirrored back. And that there's a lot of power in that as well. Yeah.
So it's like so if it's my story, it's like taking me out of it and I'm watching it being enacted in front of me.
That's right. So you would be with me, the therapist, the conductor next to me, and then a group of actors would perform whatever story you shared. And then we would often share another story from a different person in the group as a way to respond to your story. So the sharing often happens through playback itself, although we also, if I were running a workshop, we also sit and have a sharing at the end where we are connecting to how the stories connected to us so that we can all share. And it's very interesting because both forms, since you're doing psychodrama training and everything, that's one of the reasons I was leaning into that. But it's both forms, playback theater and psychodrama, rest on teaching really important skills. So if I'm working with a group of people and they're all considered clients, and I want to do psychodrama, I have to teach them how to do it well enough to be able to do an effective drama for each other. Same with playback. If I'm doing playback theater and no one has ever learned playback, in order to do playback, I have to teach it. And what we're doing is we're actually skill building. Empathy, it's great for empathic training and learning that they have capacity. They have the capacity to support each other. And how can they take that learning back into their worlds? So it's not just about being the protagonist in a tale or telling your story, although that is very important and very life-affirming and very life-changing. But as someone in psychodynamic we call it an auxiliary ego, and in playback we would say actors, right? The group would become actors. So you're learning about yourself from those roles as well. Oh, actually, I never thought I could act in the playback thing, but here I am, and I'm acting in someone else's drama because it's for them and not for me, right? It's I'm doing it on service for of the teller. And one of the questions I get asked a lot, or one of the concerns I get asked a lot, is, I can't act. I don't want to perform. And one of the titles of a book that was written by the co-founder, Jonathan Fox, who does a lot of thinking about playback, was Acts of Service. And there's a subtitle to that too, but it's the acts of service that I really think about. And I talk to people and say, yes, you're doing something that's performic, but don't consider it performance. Consider it an act of service, that you're not doing it because you're showing up as an actor. You're showing up as someone who's supporting someone else to understand themselves. And that really changes a person's perspective about how to see themselves in that role. And it can allow them to deepen their creative spaces and their spontaneous spaces.
That's interesting. And you use a lot of different approaches, you integrate them, you weave them together. And in all of these healing methods that you use, what is it that you've learned about resilience and healing?
That's a big question. What have I learned about resilience and healing? Well, I think that resilience is, I want to say that resilience comes from understanding matter. That, we become resilient even before we know we matter, but sometimes that's just simply because we have to. It's like, we have to do this, we have to do this, we have to do this. This is the only way we're going to survive, right? And that is an act of resilience. But the healing aspect of that, to me, is when you realize, I matter, therefore I do this. And we can then see ourselves in a different perspective and gain knowledge and be empowered to be able to express ourselves more fully, because we have that resilience. And sometimes resilience comes from realizing I don't have to do it all. Sometimes learning resilience and becoming more resilient is about understanding that I can delineate responsibility, or I can empower myself to do something and empower someone else to do something else, so that there's room for me to do something. And all of that is part of resilience. Being able to be present to the what is, right? And that you matter. But a lot of people are resilient through a trauma process, and it's being able to embrace that sense of changing this way in which we are resilient from fight to thrive to simply thriving.
That's beautifully put. You've traveled a lot of places: India, Bangladesh, Hong Kong, Dubai. How's that experience been for you? How do different people react to expressive arts in different countries?
Yeah, I am very blessed to have had this experience in my life from the very beginning. And in fact, when I've done my training in Playback Theater, it started as international, even though I had not started my traveling yet. But the idea behind playback, and psychodrama too, although it was less in my world, but the playback inherently is about bringing together people from different cultures and different belief systems and engaging closely through the art of storytelling in playback theater. And so in my training was primarily here in the United States, was always with people from different cultures. And that just sparked me very deeply, and engaged me very deeply. And when I started working, my first overseas was actually working with Dr. Herb Cropper in Bangladesh. He invited me to Bangladesh in 2001, and our first trip was 2002. And it was a magical experience, and it took many years of understanding and the level of cultural humility I had to learn, and how to translate my US-centric based training, even though it was culturally informed. I realized I had to really do a lot of inner work and a lot of other work to sort of be able to be present to people when I was in their territory, when I was in their country, and understanding how things needed to be done differently. And I remember very deep conversations with Jonathan Fox and Joe Salas at the beginning when I came back from my first trip or two from Bangladesh. Okay, so let's have a conversation about how we do training around this, whether it's about trauma-informed practices or whether cultural understanding, maybe we need to sort of involve other ways of thinking and other people to do it. Yeah, so it's really informed the way I teach, the way I think, the way I practice in my therapy is very much stemmed from my many years now, 22 of working overseas. In terms of how I am present with people from other cultures who are in my community. Yeah, as well as the Americans, and helping them understand their cultural background and how that influences who they are. So I've really, really opened the door to a lot of that work through the work I've done in traveling. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I feel like the work I've done in Asia, Southeast Asia, which is primarily where I've done a lot of this work, has really deepened me as a person too. So I'm very grateful, because I see myself as a collaborator, co-creator. I am a trainer. When I come, I am definitely a trainer, but I'm also learning. And I believe in the co-creative process, and I believe that everyone who's working with me has value and therefore has something also to teach and add to the process. And I can't, because I'm not living in India, I'm not living in Bangladesh, I can't know all the nuances. And that has to do with languaging too, like all the way in which we language things, the way in which we see things. Our histories, our backgrounds are different enough that I need your expertise. When I'm in India, I need to be able to sort of understand a person's story even. Yeah, yeah. Otherwise, I'm not able to see through my own lens of being from the United States, because there's many differences.
So I think that's another blessing with expressive arts, because with art, the language barrier can be taken care of with movement and with art. And, you don't need language as much. Like you said, your art can speak and the work that you do speaks. So another thing, Jenny, which the word that we hear very often these days is anxiety, So could you help us with one small exercise or something for our audience that they can do to ground themselves or feel more calm if they are going through some anxious thoughts?
Yeah, and thank you for that. And for each person, it's going to be a little different. But one of the things I do, I'm a firm believer in homework, so often I will say to clients, I said, let's develop some simple practices that can support you in soothing when it's late night and you're having trouble sleeping, or it's, you can't wait to come and tell your therapist, right? Or even just sort of a ritual, a practice, a way of waking up, a way of going to sleep, right? So whatever it is, it's being able to ground yourself in some meaningful way. So some different practices I've started, it all starts with breathing. First of all, if you're feeling anxious, find a comfortable place to rest. Feel your feet on the earth. And I say that really mindfully. It's not you might be on the 4th floor, 8th floor, 16th floor of a building, but you're still on the earth. And so allow yourself to feel that grounding of breath, breathing in, breathing into your heart, breathing into your belly, breathing all the way down through your feet into the earth, and then letting your breath come back up through your spine and up through your head. So your whole body is filling with air up into sky. And this, I like to use, I do a longer version of this, but I like to do this because it helps us connect to the elements, sky, earth, water, but it also can help us connect to each other. We're not isolated beings. We do have people around us, even if we're not close to them, like physically, we do have people who care about us and connect. And how do we connect? So that's one practice. Another practice might simply be doodling, to breathe and to doodle and to, play a little bit with doodling. Another practice I have is, ritual I have is in the morning, taking my cup of tea out and listening to the birds, listening to nature if I'm able to, finding nature, touching ground, connecting and breathing to that source, whatever that source is for you. But I find in the morning, especially if I'm still dealing with dreams, working my dreams through, is like listening to the birds, listening to the sounds around me, can be very soothing. Rituals for going to sleep, journaling. There's a lovely journaling that actually comes from Freud, automatic writing. It's also known as the morning pages, where you write for 5 minutes, you write anything you want. It can be the laundry list, the grocery list, the I hate you list, the I don't know why I'm doing this list, it can be whatever it is. And then at 5 minutes you stop and then you go, okay, take a deep breath, and you start writing again. And this time you write, okay, I'm still not sure what I'm writing, but at least I've got the laundry list, the grocery list taken care of. What's meaningful to me, right?
Yeah.
And then you can write for 5 minutes. Yeah.
I remember doing that once, and I was like, I think I kept writing. I don't know what to write. I don't know why I'm doing this exercise. I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. But then whatever that flow was, the therapist said, just keep writing it. And this is just a practice that will make it. Yes, I heard the word connection that, that's coming up from the rituals that you shared. Yes, we are, we are on our phones before we go to sleep. We wake up and the first thing we do is check the phone and, we want to know what's happening. And so having that connection, having that grounding, like you said, with whatever the source is around us, it's a beautiful thing to do. Yeah.
So there's, and also what is the avenue by which, from an expressive arts perspective, the avenue might be going to play music or singing, a few bars in the shower, like, in your car with the windows up, like let yourself sing a song you've always wanted to sing, and and let that creative self come through. I love to hum. And, so I hum. And that way, the vibrations are soothing the cellular level. Movement, Qigong, Tai Chi, yoga, any of those kinds of things, even 5 minutes can make a huge difference.
That's important that you mentioned that, because many a times the struggle is I don't have time. But even if it's 5 minutes, it's important, like you said.
5 minutes can be simply enough to say, oh yeah, that too. Here it is, and sometimes I only have 5 minutes, and so 5 minutes of this, and then I'm like, okay.
Jennie, could you share a moment of breakthrough in your experience as a therapist or with your client?
I've had a number. For me, the breakthroughs represent the ahas, where clients, either I or the clients go, oh, okay, this is what's happening in the world. I did have a client who I saw for about 7 or 8 years over a period of time. She was working on childhood abuse, and she was in her mid-50s when I met her. And she did this piece of work, drawing, and actually it was a breakthrough for me and for a lot of reasons. But she did this drawing where I looked at it, it looked like a volcano. And it looked like, volcano and smoke erupting. And I actually did a no in the work. I made an assumption, And I said, oh, this is interesting. It looks to me like it's a volcano. And she looked at me and she said, that's not a volcano. That's, the mountain and the clouds above it. And, it's very pastoral, very beautiful. And I said, good, excellent. So first note to self was, don't make assumptions about other people's art. Even if what you think you're seeing is one thing, they're not. Anyway, so we move on. We do some work. I will say in the back of my mind, I was thinking, 2 or 3 sessions later, she came back into the office, and we had done some other kinds of work and everything. She came back in my office and she said, could we pull that picture out for a minute? And we pulled out the picture of this mountain, pastoral mountain with the cloud on top. And I said, tell me more about what you want to see. She said, 3 weeks ago, you asked me if this was a volcano. And all I can tell you is for the last 3 weeks, I've been irrationally angry at everybody in my life. And I said, okay, tell me more, because I had learned my lesson the first time, not to interpret. And I said, tell me more, what's going on? She said, I think you're right. I think it was a volcano erupting, because that's what I feel like I'm doing. I'm just erupting on everybody. I'm just so angry. Anyway, so fast forward, it was a learning for me about interpretation, not interpreting. It was about letting the client be where they were and what they could see and what they could experience. But then she came to this aha in her own time, in her own way, being able to see it for what it was, and then moved her to a new level of work. And so that to me is one breakthrough that I've remembered. Another breakthrough had to do with working with a client also traumatized. I do a lot of work with trauma. And this woman had really struggled with her mother, painful, because she was also her mother's guardian, and she hated that role. She didn't want to be in that role, but there was nobody else to be in the role. And, there was this toxic relationship. So we were really moving. And one day I put a piece of paper up on the wall and gave her some clay. And I said, you can do whatever you want with this clay. And if you throw it, it has to be on the paper, because this is not my office, it's somebody else's office. So she had a target, right? And she, for about 15 to 20 minutes, she threw pieces of clay at the wall and it stuck to the paper. And she just said, I hate you. I don't, she was saying all these things. And at first I wasn't sure who she was talking to, whether she was talking to herself or to her mother. She was like, and then it became clear she was talking to her mother. Fast forward, she finishes. I said, are you at a place of completion? Are you ready to move on? And she, it was about 20 minutes later, she was really, we would pull off the clay. She would do it again, Anyways, so she said, yeah, I'm ready. And we just took some time to breathe and took some time to connect and ground, because that's big work. And so what should we do with the clay? She says, I want to build something. I want to make something. And so she took it off the wall and recreated it into this gorgeous vessel. I think it was a pot. And it was beautiful. And she spent the rest of the hour working on this vessel to be able to carve it and shape it and make it. And she took it home with her because it was representing her new self, her new way of being, the potential, the vessel, so that she could fill herself up with positivity and embracing. And from a therapeutic clinical perspective, we call that destruction reconstruction. There's actually a process that we were going through where we deconstruct and we concretize these feelings and emotions, and you can do it with paper, work paper, or shred paper, whatever. But that was clay. And then reconstructing a new self, a new identity, a new way of being. Fast forward 3 or 4 years after therapy ended, I get a postcard from her. And again, these are the positive stories, I get a postcard from her saying, thank you for helping me divorce my mom. It really worked, and it helped me be a much different kind of daughter and better to myself. So it was very empowering for her. And again, the power of the arts. The power of the arts are just so clear, being able to use clay, and clay could have been done in any different way. And of course, through Playback Theater, through psychodrama, the dramas, the storytelling, the sharing. Often we share a story with this isn't a really important story, but I'll tell it anyway, because it's what's coming up. And then it's played back, and all of a sudden the teller is in tears. Because however it was played back in such a way that it helped them see themselves more fully, more seen, right? And there are a number of stories that I can think of where a person will come to the teller's chair, and say, I'm not actually sure what I'm going to say, but here's a glimmer, here's something. And then they come back and go, I just realized something about myself I never saw before. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. And I love the way, that's exactly, you summed it up. That's exactly what a journey in therapy is. You deconstruct and you reconstruct. And then when you're able to do it with something concrete, there's so much that needs to come out. There's so much that needs to be processed. And then this whole recreating yourself. That's so beautifully put, Jennie.
Yeah, and there are many moments in which I've seen clients in a group when I do playback, or any kind of dramatic action, really sort of come alive in a way that they hadn't been able to before, and give voice to themselves in a way that they hadn't been able to do before. And part of playback theater is also music. And so I always have musical instruments. And so often people pick up music for the first time ever to become the musician. And they learn about themselves in that way. And that you're always opening doors in their brains. You're opening, creating new neurons, creating new pathways in their brain to engage. And they find out things about themselves they never even thought was possible. I had one person actually say to me, "How do you stay so young?" I was like, "The work." You know, I love what I do, it's so much fun. And that's part of the practice. I have to actually keep doing it for myself. I have to practice what I preach and go into my studio and do things. And that way, that also helps me connect to the source, really, the creativity and spontaneous self. Yeah.
I think after all the conversation that we've had today, I just feel like going back home, taking some colors,
Good.
just being a little messy, doodling. And I've always had a judgment on my art. I can't draw, I can't paint, I can't do anything. So I'm going to change that narrative today, no matter
I
what I
think you,
create.
I think you should. I think you should change the narrative today and go, "Oh, look at what I did. How interesting is that?" I mean, I've got this thing because I do a lot of telehealth. I mean, this is just a bunch of what do
Clips.
you call it? Clips. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's like, "Oh, what can I do with these? Oh, that's really cool. Look at that. That's amazing." Just to have a little
Ye-
fun.
yes, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that today. And if whatever I create, I'm going to send you a picture. I'm going to mail it to you.
Please do. I would love it. I would absolutely love it. And yeah, totally.
I'll do that. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you
And
so much. It's an honor. Yeah. Yeah.